cackling. I'm no cackle. Is she smarter than a third grader? I don't know. Welcome to the channel. My name is Amanya, and I make conservative content on this channel. I am the conservative poet, bringing you some news on what's happening in the world of politics. So today we're talking with our friend, well, I shouldn't say our friend, but the most powerful woman on the planet, not Nancy Pelosi, talking about the VP herself. Kamala Harris is being interviewed at the DNC, the Democrat Committee Conference, Woman Leadership Forum, something like that. She's being interviewed by an actress, and there's a lot of questions that they're asking, and they're talking, having great conversation, talking, really saying nothing. But hey, I decided to sit in and have my own take on the interview. God, it was excruciating to sit there through the whole thing. Well, I didn't sit through the whole thing. I couldn't have done it. I couldn't do it, friends. It was too hard. But I did sit through a majority of it, which was excruciating. And but I'm bringing that to you in a few moments. But before I do that, I want to say thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing to the channel. Thanks for helping me grow it. I've got great plans for the channel and a lot of things that I want to do. So thank you for subscribing. Please share it if you like it, if you find it funny, if you're entertained. Hell, just like it and share it. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And also check out my sales on my Orlando Patriot website, where I got all your great merch, all your great merchandise, all your great t-shirts, everything. Love it. Go check it out. 20% discount, y'all. You can't beat that. 20%. Support this patriot. Working hard for my people. I'm working hard for my country. Support me, baby. All right, let's get into it. Kamala.
At Russia's unprovoked war in Ukraine. We thought it was pretty well settled, the issue of territorial integrity and sovereignty. And now that is up for some debate, given what's happening.
Territorial sovereignty. That is what Russia is taking from Ukraine. What about America's territorial sovereignty in the invasion that's happening to this country on the open borders? Borders are. What about that?
Country. We thought, surely with the Voting Rights Act and all that it stood for, we assumed and thought the issue of voting rights in America was settled. Then we had the Shelby v. Holder decision, and then after the 2020 election, when more people voted and more young people voted.
More people voted, more dead bodies voted than any other time in the history of our elections.
Than ever before, states around our country started systematically and intentionally making it more difficult for people to vote.
You call having voter ID systematically racist? Having voter ID. You need voter ID for everything in this country. You needed to go to Walmart and buy a bottle of wine. You needed to have a driver. You need to drive a car with it. You need to open up a bank account with it. You need to buy cigarettes with it. But to make decisions on the most important freedoms in our country is voting as to who to put in power. You say, no, we don't need no ID. No, it's not that important. Really? It's not that important to have voter ID?
We thought a woman's right, a constitutional right, to make decisions about her own body was settled.
A constitutional right, the right to live your life. You have a right to be born. If you're produced, then you have the right to life. No, abortion is not a constitutional right.
Scott King famously said, I'll paraphrase, the fight for civil rights, which is the fight for justice, the fight for equality, must be fought and won with each generation.
I want my freedom. I have civil rights. I have civil rights. I can go anywhere I want to go. If I work hard and do the things that I need to do, just like you did. Look at you. You are the American dream. The first Black woman vice president. The way you got there, a different story. But there you are, sitting in the seat at the table, the VP of this nation. But yet you're still standing there spewing that civil rights are at violations. Obama, president, Black man. But you're still saying America is a racist country? There you are, sitting at the seat. You're sitting at the table. Your right hand to Joe Biden. Hell, your left hand to him too. Your left and right to him, because he don't know which way he's going. And neither do you. But this is where we are. Coretta Scott King. And I'm sure she's not quoting it the same way you're making it out to be. Do you know her husband? He was a Republican. Do you know that? And I'm sure she was too.
It's the nature of it, which is why everyone in this room continues to be vigilant.
You better believe it won't be permanent, because God has his hands, right? God has his hands on all of this that's going on. Just like Roe v. Wade was overturned, we may not have been able to overturn this 2020 sham of an election, but make no mistake, as you say, the next 39 days is going to be crucial. It's going to be crucial. It's going to be the red wave, baby. So yeah, it's critical.
In fighting to maintain the progress that we've made, and also where there have been steps backward, to push it forward. It's the nature of it. So yes, we must be clear-eyed and do what is necessary at the moment, and that's why we're all convened here.
Nobody wants to step backwards. We all want to move forward in the world, but we want to hold on to our values. We want to hold on to our Constitution. We want to hold on to the laws that were put in place that's guided us, this country. You want to go back to segregation? That's what you're spewing. That's what you're doing. Separating people, separating the races.
So extreme weather conditions like this are becoming obviously more frequent and more severe, and I wanted to acknowledge the administration for passing the biggest climate legislation in history earlier this year. Implications of emissions, right? The poorest countries are affected the most. They contribute the least and are affected the most. So how should voters in the US feel about the administration's long-term goals when it comes to being an international influencer on this topic?
I'm going to unpack that question.
I'm going to ask you like packed and loaded questions.
First of all, again, thanks to the leadership in this room, which were part of the propelling force in the 2020 election, so that we could actually be in office, because one of the requests, dare I say, demands of this group was do something about the climate crisis. And so we were able to be elected. Thank you, everyone here.
You know, you're thanking people for getting you elected? Better go visit those graveyards, friend. It's where the bodies are buried.
And then have the have then $370 billion in the Inflation Reduction Act dedicated to address the climate crisis. Not only because it is a crisis, as a
Inflation Reduction Act. I mean, that's what it's called, the Inflation Reduction Act. why the climate crisis have anything to do with the Inflation Reduction Act. Inflation is about money. You're talking climate change, about the weather. How do the two go together? Help me understand, friend. Make it make sense.
As evidenced, as you've mentioned, by Ian, by the wildfires happening in California, the floods, the hurricanes, but also because of America's leadership and what it should be globally.
So they want to control the weather? Is that where we're headed here? You want to control the weather? You want to control hurricanes and storms and earthquakes and all of these things.
And so that has happened, and it will propel a lot of good work. The crisis is real and the clock is ticking, and the urgency.
The clock is ticking. We're ticking down to the 2022 election. The clock is ticking to get y'all out of office.
With which we must act is without any question. And the way that we think of it, and the way I think of it, is both in terms of the human toll, and I know we are all thinking about the families in Florida, in Puerto Rico, with Fiona, and what we need to do to help them in terms of an immediate response and aid, but also what we need to do to help restore communities and build communities back up in a way that they can be resilient, not to mention adapt to these extreme weather conditions, which are part of the future. On the point that you...
Yeah, they are part of the future, and a lot worse is coming from the future. Because this whole climate change craziness that they're so afraid of, I believe, they're afraid of the redemption. They're afraid of the rapture, of all this coming to an end. They're afraid of our Father the Lord returning to do his business, to do the judgment upon these people. That is what they're afraid of. They're afraid of the famine that's going to come. They're afraid of the judgment that's going to come. They're afraid of the diseases. They're afraid of everything that's going to come. And they will come. Revelations tells us they will come. So you can, build electric cars if you want to. You can, climate change it all day and all of this. You can do whatever you want. Make no mistake. The end will come. Call it climate change if you want to.
You made about disparities. When I was district attorney of San Francisco, I was elected in 2003. I started
But now it's a shithole.
first environmental justice units of any DA's office in the country focused on this issue, and in particular on the disparities as you.
Environmental justice. Wait a minute. Aren't people living on the streets out there? Pissing on the ground, shitting on the ground, needles on the ground, all kinds of stuff on the ground. Isn't that out there? Where they're living in tents, camped out on the roads? Isn't that bad for the environment?
These are lowest income communities and our communities of color that are most impacted by these extreme conditions and impacted by issues that are not of their own making. And so absolutely. And so we have to.
Wait. So the storm is racist against people of color? Against poor people? I thought all humans is sitting around waiting for the storm. All humans may have power outages. All humans may not be able to get to the grocery. It's black people, and this one says women. So the storms are sexist and they're racist? The storms are sexist and they're racist? Oh my goodness.
To address this in a way that is about giving resources based on equity, understanding that we fight for equality, but we also need to fight for equity, understanding not everyone starts out at the same place.
We all start at the same place. There's a storm coming. It's going to affect everybody. It's going to affect everybody. What a disgrace. VP, huh?
And if we want people to be in an equal place, sometimes we have to take into account those disparities and do that work.
The dum-dums
But
in the audience.
also, I will say, as a former prosecutor, part of this issue also has to be about enforcement and where appropriate.
We know how you enforce. Lock up all the blacks. But now your story's changed, right? Story's changed.
Environment and industry, what it will do in terms of job creation and building up our economy.
Is it really going to do that? Is it really? It's going to create jobs? Is that what you said? Where? In China?
It's tremendous.
The
So
dum-dums.
there are many benefits to this work, and to your point about the global piece. Among the leaders that I have been meeting and convening, just recently, in fact, and now this was, I think, the third time, I convened the presidents and prime ministers of the Caribbean countries. There's an organization called CARICOM. And I convened them just a couple weeks ago. And the consistent discussion we are having is exactly your point, which is we are one of the greatest emitters in the world. And the
China? Anybody? China, the most contributor of all of this? China? No?
Caribbean countries, for example, are paying the biggest price. They are some of the lowest emitters, yet the erosion that they are experiencing to their island nations is profound. And when you combine that with the fact that nations like that, their biggest source for their GDP is tourism, and what the climate crisis and extreme weather conditions do in terms of them plummeting their incoming resources, not to mention what we are expecting all good nations to do to contribute to mitigation and adaptation. So there is still a lot of work to be done to recognize the equities. And I will say for us as the United States to own responsibility for what we rightly should do to recognize these disparities and contribute in a way that is fair with the goal of equitable priorities.
Thank you for saying that.
Oh my God. You are the vice president of this country? And this is how you treat this country? When you put us at the forefront, like we're the biggest contributor of this thing, everybody contributes. But you don't mention China. Why don't you mention the smaller countries that's being affected? Why don't you mention the bigger countries that's contributing to it, that's causing it? Such a fucking hypocrite. As a woman of color, I am ashamed to say that that woman is what they say represents me. I am ashamed. Because that woman does not represent me. Are you smarter than a fifth grader? I don't think so.